Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel, sort of. I am naturopathic Dr. Fiona Chin, and I am joined again today by the amazing Alyce Adams. But today is a little bit different because it's not just the Kidney Coach YouTube channel today. We are co-sharing a podcast to discuss some amazing things. But Alyce, I'm going to hand it across to you first to introduce yourself, and then we can delve into it from there.
Cool. So I'm Alyce Adams. I'm a registered nurse and I'm the Kegel Queen. I help women resolve prolapse without surgery, care for prolapse without surgery. I help women with incontinence and I help women have great sex. I don't know if we can say sex, but I just did.
Yeah, we
so.
can. Yeah, we can.
And
So
I really wanted to talk to you, Fiona, about this because I'm a nurse. I have trained back in the 90s. I was trained as an herbalist. I did a 2-year apprenticeship, but it was like a garden and kitchen based kind of training. And then in nursing school, it's like pharmaceuticals. And when it comes to supplements, and things like minerals or nutritional supplements or herbs that are in bottles, I am finding myself kind of at sea, not knowing how to tell what's good. And you said, "Oh, I totally know what's good," and I was like, "Well, let's talk about it then, because I want to know." And when we talked before, it became clear to me there are certain things that are sort of more easily teachable and transferable. And then there are some other bits of knowledge that you really have to either research each individual piece yourself, like spend, an hour in PubMed looking at it, or you have to already be trained, like as you are as a medical practitioner. So there's a lot to this, and my hope is that the audience and I can come away with some basic rules to look for when we're looking at supplements, and that also we can kind of make a distinction about like which things can we kind of know ourselves and which things do we really have to dig deep into or have an expert tell us about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and great question. And it's funny, being a naturopath, we get really particular about what brands and things that we will use because we have this information. And it, especially here in Australia, it's the bane of our existence when we see patients come in and we tend to sell practice. So in Australia, we've got things called practitioner-only products, and they are products that can only be prescribed by a practitioner, and they're still herbal and nutritional medicine. And then you get these, we call them maybe cheap, maybe subpar, not always, products coming out on the shelf that are cheaper, made by brands that maybe aren't doing the same type of testing, aren't using proper therapeutic dosages, aren't using herbs or minerals in their correct form. And that is the undoing of the, sometimes natural medicine gets a hard time because supplements don't work and things like that. And it generally is due to supplement companies and nutritional or herbal formulas cutting corners and not doing the proper testing or using the correct herbs. There was a huge incident in Australia back in the early 2000s by Pan, and it was certain brands were not, we call it a HPLCT test, which is like it takes a fingerprint of the herb to say the name of the herb on this bottle is the name of the herb in there. And I can tell, we'll go through this, but most companies don't do that. You don't have to do it if you're manufacturing in the US. You don't have to. In Australia, if you're registered with the TGA, you 100% have to do it. And we'll go through the differences in countries. But there were products here that said it was, I think it was like Skullcap, but it was a really cheap version that doesn't have that dosage in it and was liver toxic. So these are the things that consumers will not know. And it's that sort of stuff that we want to talk about. How do you know if the herb that's saying on the bottle is in there? How do you know it's actually even in therapeutic dosage range? Because of, and we'll go through this, what type of magnesium do I take? Should it be in liposomal form? Like, it is you are correct. It's a minefield if you don't know, and if you're not spending hours of research looking. And of course, we've got then these big marketing things that come out and say it's this or it's that. And how do you know to, what's right and what's not? So that's what we wanted to help. And it was great that you asked me this question. That's what we wanted to give some people clarity on the best way that we can without giving you a degree in how to read labels.
Right. I know, exactly. I mean, I really think too, it's kind of good that all we have is, this one limited time in this video, because more than that, it's just like what people need is something they can keep in their back pocket. That's like a postage stamp size amount of information, just a couple things to look at. And I'm one also very pleased that I can rely on you about certain things, because I don't, I don't want to become a naturopath. I don't want to become a physician. And I have other things to do and think about and be an expert in. And I'm happy to hear from you without necessarily having to know every single thing about everything.
Yeah. And even if I'm looking for a supplement, and I'm saying, sometimes I go to iHerb. I have obviously wholesale supplies that I buy from and by practitioner only, but sometimes I can't get a certain formula in Australia and I have to go to iHerb, and then I go down the rabbit hole of having to check all this information. So I'm just going to walk you through what I do. But the first thing I want to preface this all with is that is why there are naturopaths and integrated medicine practitioners. I can't recommend enough that if you don't know what you're doing, work with a practitioner, because that's what we're trained in. We know how to discern a good brand from a bad one when we're prescribing things that are practitioner-only products. So I know in the US, I think Metagenics is one of your practitioner-only products. You can get it on Amazon, and they are, really high quality products. And there is the age of saying you do get what you pay for. If a product is a little bit more expensive, it's because generally it's in therapeutic dose. They've done proper testing. It's probably not GMO'd, it's not come out of a heavily pesticide, place somewhere. So there is that. And so cutting corners on supplements, sometimes it can be helpful if you know what you're looking for, but generally you are getting what you pay for. And I do recommend working with a practitioner just to, get recommendations and things like that. But if you're someone that doesn't have access to that or has taken stuff before and you're pretty confident about what herbs and things to take, let's walk through how to read a label and what you're looking for. So you had some great questions, Alyce. Is there anywhere you wanted me to start with? I can I can dive into the things that we know definitely, at least for herbs and things like that.
Well, I would say, one of the first things that you said, that just to frame the whole thing, is that you said it's important to know the manufacturer. Like if you know the brand versus that you don't know the brand. If you know the brand and you know the brand is reputable, or you know the brand and you know the brand is not reputable, that's an incredible shortcut right there. And another super shortcut, not to dig into it too deeply, but you were talking about the regulations in the US versus Canada versus Australia. So can you just give us a quick, and here in the States, it's not like we get shipments of Australian herbal supplements, but just to make the point about how things are regulated or not in different places.
Sure. So in the US, you've got the FDA, and in Australia, we've got the TGA. Now, so TGA is the Therapeutic Goods Act of Australia. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration of Food and Drug FDA.
10 points.
Pass. So the TGA is as I understand it, the strictest governing body in the world for regulating nutritional supplements. So anything produced in Australia that goes on the Australian shelves has to have an AUSTEL number. That AUSTEL number goes on the front, and that says that the TGA has looked at it. There is no nutrients or herbs or whatever in there that are banned or not regulated by the TGA. Now, the FDA oversees all of that, but you don't have to have your products registered with the FDA. So anyone in Australian manufacturing, they have to be registered with the TGA to get on a shelf. And you pay quite a bit of money for that. The FDA, you don't. So myself, we manufacture in the US because that's where all our customers are. And while all our label claims and anything on our website is governed by the FDA, they don't go through and do a great big check before we manufacture and turn over. So that's the big difference. So anything manufactured in Australia is properly overlooked. The formulas have to get approved, and you're paying about 20,000 Australian dollars per formula, thereabouts, to get it registered with the TGA and get this AUSTEL number on it. Versus the FDA in the US, we can go ahead and manufacture, and you can manufacture whatever you want in the US, but your label claims and anything on the website, that is governed by the FDA. And if you're putting things up like this formula cures diabetes, the FDA are going to come knocking at your door, and they're going to pull your site down, and they're going to take your product away. So that's how they govern it. They almost govern on the back end. Australia governs on the front end. So that's the difference between TGA and FDA. We manufactured in the US simply because we're shipping out of the US. That's where all our customers are. And it's really hard to, well, it's not really hard, but we could manufacture in Australia, then we have to pay to ship it all the way over, because you're paying for the AUSTEL number. So our manufacturing in Australia would have been about 5 times the price. That's why we don't do it here.
And the shipping itself.
And I've still got so all our herbal tea was originally done in Australia. I've still got herbal tea from a year ago stuck in customs, because just customs borders and just getting clearance and IPL numbers and IFS numbers and stuff that I don't understand. So that's why we don't do it. And it was like $70,000 to ship over, and then you have to give that to the customer. No. So we do all our stuff in the US. But when manufacturing in the US, there are manufacturers that are what we call CG camp approved, and they are registered with the FDA. So if I look at my bottle here, CGM approved, registered. So
and
if I'm looking,
and that stands for CGM.
CGM, it's like a certification that the FDA have approved. It's like the certification practices of how they manufacture.
Okay.
So that is like an approved manufacturing facility. So the number one, whatever you buy, make sure that it says it was manufactured in a GMP certified facility. That's number one.
And that's good manufacturing practices.
Exactly.
And that's for just herbs, or that's for any supplement at all? Okay.
Yeah. So that's first thing. That means that those manufacturers have had the FDA go through them and check that, it's a bit like having a clean restaurant. And number two, that they're doing things like the HPLC testing, the fingerprint testing for the herbs, that they're getting good quality stuff, that they're not cross-contaminating, all of those sort of things. So that's the first thing to look for. So me as a producer, when I was looking for a manufacturer in the US, the first one I wanted to do was there any manufacturers that were approved by the TGA? Because I know how tough that is. And there is one. And that's who we manufacture with. And they haven't kept it because it's so expensive to keep it. But there was only one manufacturer I could find that was up to the standard of Australian, and that's who we used, because we were so hell-bent, for want of a better word, on making sure that our supplements were as best quality as we could. And it costs a bit more, but that's because we want to pass really good quality on to consumers, and we want our products to work. So that's the first thing to look for. Then, and I mentioned to you before, and I'm going to actually share my screen with you to show you this. When we get our herbs in, or our manufacturer is making, say, our kidney prime, which has got all these different herbs in there, and they're all different sort of strengths and things like that, I want to know that the herb going in is the herb that I'm putting on the label bottle. So I say to my manufacturer, how do I know? So they send me a full analytical report, and I get that every batch that we run to say that the herb gone in is the herb that I'm making the claim about, or the writing on the label. It's checked. So we check for heavy metals, we check for pesticides, we check for GMO. Our products are generally vegan, and they are gluten-free. And so if you do all of that, you have to understand that the manufacturer, so say for me in this instance, we pay for all of that extra testing. Again, it's optional. Not every company does that. And not every company is going to put that on their labels, because, it's very specific what you can label, claim, and put on there. And
Yes.
there's not a lot of room on labels. So sometimes it'll be on their website. Sometimes it won't be there. So you have to know how to dig all of this sort of stuff up. We put the good manufacturing procedure practices on our bottle. So we've got that on there. We've got non-GMO on our bottle, but we don't say that it's tested for heavy metals and because there's just no room.
There's
but
no room.
There's no room.
And there's no sort of like single sentence that would summarize that. There's no sort of like standard thing where you could just say, oh, it has this other stamp. It's just.
No, they don't do that. And again, I think it's because consumers don't know that we do this or not. Maybe it's not important to consumers. Again, you've got very limited space on a label. So the best thing that I can suggest is if you're in, say, Whole Foods and you're looking at supplements, is to get out your phone and jump onto the website, and you can see this. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you what that actually looks like.
Okay.
Share screen. I have to apologize for the 50 million tabs that I have open.
Wow, that is an impressive number.
It is. So if I go on to, now iHerb is one that everybody knows, right? So if I go on and I've just pulled up some different sort of things there, and we'll just take this turmeric here and I'll walk you through that. Sometimes they'll say on there, so they'll say non-GMO. They'll say no artificial colors, no flavors, no sweeteners, no starch, no milk, no blah, blah, blah. So that's great. Do they say it was put into a CGMP, the GMP facility? They don't say that. Do they have that on their label? No. So do you know, or do you not know if it was in there? I mean, this is very cheap turmeric. So I don't know if it was put into a proper test. So let's have a look. They've got guaranteed quality, laboratory tested. Maybe they have, but again, they're big claims, right? How do I know all of this sort of stuff?
Yeah. And the thing where they say non-GMO, et cetera, you need to kind of take them at their word about that.
You do. If you are really unsure, you can ask companies to send you the analysis. We sometimes get emails saying, can you send us all your analysis? And we've got them on file, so we can. This company, Lost Empires, actually on their website. Now, this is a what we call a landing page, but they actually have all of these reports. So they've got a non-GMO certificate of analysis, heavy metal and microbial certificate, and the identity certificate of analysis, which is the big one you want. That's the one to make sure that the herb in there is in there. So let's see, I thought I'd opened all of these up. So
I know Logan from Lost Empire. He's a good guy.
Yeah, and they do great products because they're testing all of this. So you can go to an identity certificate of analysis and it will say material tested, pine pollen. Yes, it is the Pinus species pollen. This is this fingerprint test, so this high performance thin layered chronography. So that HPTLC that I was talking about, that's that fingerprint. So that's when it goes in and says, is this plant, because you can get species, pine pollen's not so much one of them, but say skull cap's one where there's like 70 different types of skull cap. You can say it's this skull cap, but you can get a really cheap one that doesn't have any medicinal properties in it. And that's where this HPTLC testing will tell you it's exactly the right species.
Well, and also if it is adulterated with something accidentally, I remember, I think it was in the 90s, there was a big scandal where plantain, like Plantago, I don't know, Plantago lanceolata, Plantago major, one of those was contaminated with digitalis, which is
very
dangerous.
Yeah,
and I'm sure nobody intended that, but it was just whoever was harvesting didn't know. And
yeah, you do. So if you are unsure, or you're buying this is for herbs specifically, this is not for minerals. If you're buying herbs all the time from a manufacturer and you're not sure, ask them for this. And then once you've got it once and you know that they're testing it, again, you can make an assumption that they're going to be doing that every time. We do it every single new batch that we run. It always gets HPTLC testing every time. Then you want the heavy metal mineral microbial certificate. Again, we run this every single time because we have all our herbs grown in the US. We have to bring one herb in from China, and that's the danshen, to get it in really good therapeutic doses. It's organic, which is the only reason I bring it in. But because it's coming in from China, where there potentially are more heavy metal spraying and all of those sort of things, I want to make sure, even though it's organic, that it is not contaminated in any way, shape, or form. So we run this, we're running this on all of those. So you can get an analysis to make sure there's no microbes in there, and to make sure that there's no heavy metals. And again, if your bottle that you're buying says it's in a good manufacturing practices, so a GMP facility, I'm pretty sure this is done anyway. This is part of that. And then you can have non-GMO certificate of analysis, full spectrum mineral report. These guys have got everything. No pesticide report, no glycophosphate report. They've got extra reports there that most people don't. But the big ones that you want, and it just depends what's important to you. We run the non-GMO. We don't run a big mineral report or anything like that, but we run non-GMO. You want to make sure that there's no microbes and heavy metal, and you really want this HPTLC. And if you email a company for that, they should give that to you. There's no reason that you shouldn't get that information.
And which of these things, the chromatography would be for herbs? But what if you're buying a single chemical supplement like, magnesium citrate or CoQ10 or something? If it's just one molecule you're going for, which of these things apply to that, and which of them are just for herbs?
Most of these are just for herbs. So the heavy metal microbial, I think they still run that on our minerals. I'm trying to think. Again, you get a certificate of analysis. So again, when we're bringing in, say, magnesium or vitamin E or anything like that, I get a certificate to say what's in it, and a sign off. And so it's more done via chemical testing. It's not done via HPTLC. It's a sign off that this is exactly what it's saying it is. So I think they still call it a certificate of analysis. It's just not done by the HPTLC, which is specific to herbs. So you can still ask for that. And ours is still, I think, done for heavy metals and microbes. I'm 90% sure. But yeah, that HTPLC is very specific to herbs. And then the non-GMO, you can definitely get on minerals and things like that, especially if you've got, like, say it's a fat soluble vitamin and it's got sunflower oil in there. You want to make, or, soybean oil or something like that. If it's a CoQ10, sometimes they sneak that stuff in there. You want to make sure that it's those oils is where you're going to see GMO. So you want to make sure that, your sunflower oil in your liposomal formula or something like that is non-GMO. So you could definitely ask for a GMO. That would be the most important one. And when you're looking at liposomal formulas, or things that have got any of the oils in them, that's when I would really want to know about this GMO certificate.
Yeah, and I was disappointed. I'm hoping we'll have time to talk about these couple of things from my own shelf. I've got something right here.
I went and had a look at them last night.
Yeah, yeah. This certain things, like, can you even get CoQ10 without oils like that in it?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's yeah. And back to your point that you mentioned before, brands and knowing good ones. And there are brands that I just stick to because I know they're good. I know their manufacturing procedures. And so I just tend to buy in what I know. And that's also a really safe way to do it, is if you've got a favorite brand, ask for all of this, do a whole pile of research. And if it ticks all those boxes, then you can keep buying that brand because you know their entire manufacturing procedure and how they go about it is going to be really good. Don't be afraid to get on the phone and call them and talk to them and find out if they're personable, how do they care about their manufacturing, procedures, and get a really good idea, and then get brand loyal. A lot of us just are running into supermarkets or to Whole Foods and just grabbing stuff off the shelf, and you really don't know what you're taking. So back to my point is either work with a practitioner that can guide you on that, or go and do just, an hour research on a website, give them a call, email for this information. If you get it back, then stick to a certain brand. They're my big recommendations. So for me, like, if I don't know a brand, I just, won't tend to buy it. Now, Thorn, if people are looking for a good brand, yes, they're a lot more expensive, but they are, they tick all the boxes. They are very, very high quality. They are pharmaceutical grade, meaning anything that goes into the minerals and things like that, that's how we do as well. All our stuff is pharmaceutical grade. It's pure and clean. It's not adulterated. Mm-hmm. The other big thing to look at is the excipients, because it might just say that it has other, like it's got turmeric in it, but you look at other ingredients, it's got cellulose, oat fiber, rice bran, magnesium silicate, magnesium stearate. So you go, okay, and it says it's gluten-free, but it's got oat fiber in it. So
and this is the one, the I herb. I can't say herb. I can't do it. I herb. It sounds weird too. But so this is the like cheap turmeric that is, we're wondering about the quality of this one.
Yeah, well, I don't know the brand. It might be fine, but it says gluten-free, but it's got oat fiber in it. Now you can get gluten-free oats, but for me, being a celiac, there's someone I'd be straight on the phone to saying, I want to see your gluten-free certificate. You've got oat fiber in there. It may be gluten-free oats. That well and truly may be the case. But if there's any cross-contamination in there and you're a celiac and you're saying it's gluten-free without that certificate, I would be concerned. So yeah, there are all of those sort of things. Now, the other thing when it comes to herbs, and this was something that, we were talking about last time, is it says it's got 500 milligrams of turmeric root in there. What does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? Like, okay,
right.
That's got
like 500 milligrams of the root powder, or is it 500 milligrams of something else?
Yeah. Yeah. So in the US, and this is where Australia and the US are very different. In the US, you can just say 500 milligrams, and that is dried root. But we don't know if that dried root is what we call a 4-to-1, 10-to-1, 1-to-1. It doesn't actually tell us how active that plant is. Because
explain what you mean about those ratios.
When we extract the herb, so when we process the herb, you can potentize the herb. So for instance, let's talk about, it's balancing on my bottle here, but I'm just going to do a little, excuse my camera moving. So one of the herbs that we use in our Kidney Prime is Foti. Now, we want to make sure, because we've got our kidney disease solution, we say this is the dosage range or the therapeutic range of the herb that you have to get. And we're talking about equivalent dried root to get therapeutic range, right? Okay. So we've got 375 milligrams of dry root powder Foti in our formula, but it's a 4-to-1. So you take 375 and you times it by 4, and that tells you how much dried root it was extracted from. Does that make sense? Do you want me to go through that again?
So let me see if I can say that back to you accurately, because I didn't, when last time we talked, and I didn't really understand this. So let's see if I got it. So if you, it's like if you had a cup of carrots and you're getting, 3 milligrams of vitamin A out of it, or carotene, say, it's what's the ratio of carotene to the original carrots?
Sort of, yeah. It's how much dried root, how many kilos of carrots were needed to get out the beta carotene.
Okay.
So the dosage range or the therapeutic range, say, is you can have 1 kilo of carrots a day. That's healthy. Anything more than 1 kilo of carrot, that's where we know this carrot works, or OT. So then we extract from that and we put it into milligrams. But not all milligrams are created equal, because you want to make sure that you're getting 1 kilo of carrots. So 500 milligrams of turmeric may or may not be in the dosage range of how much turmeric you want. You don't know that, because in the US, you don't say whether it's a 4-to-1, a 5-to-1, or 1-to-1. You're assuming it's a 1-to-1 most of the time. But in Australia, we have to say this was a 4-to-1, a 10-to-1, or whatever it is. That's how our labels are different. We have to claim that, so you can actually work out how many plants were murdered or how many plants were used to get that dose. And that's where you're actually working out how therapeutic or what dosage range the herb is in. So for us, say Dan Shen, for instance, which is a herb, so our Dan Shen is a 10-to-1 because you need 1.2 grams of that herb to be accurate to get, oh no, it's 2.4 grams of herb a day to get therapeutic dosage range. Now you can't get 2.4 grams in a capsule, but when it's extracted in a 10-to-1, that means when you take that out, and we've got 125 milligrams per 2 capsules, you times that by 10. And then you're taking 4 capsules a day, you're in therapeutic range. So people can look at that and go, okay, that formula is the therapeutic dosage range that we know Dan Shen will work at. Does that make sense?
Right. So you have to extrapolate from the amount. So if there's a formula you could set up so that you would have the number of milligrams on the label and the ratio on the label, and that will tell you how many carrots it came from.
Exactly. So we label, hang on, I'm going to show you. Excuse this. So this is our bottle, and can you see how it's got the little 10-to-1, 1-to-1, 4-to-1s after each herb?
Not really, but if you stop sharing your screen, we might be able to see that.
You know what I'll do? I'll just take you to our website and I'll show you.
Hey, even better.
So if we go to our products here and I go to Kidney Prime, I'll show you the label this way, much better. So if we go here, on little Kidney Prime, and we go to our label, which is going to come and pop up on the left side here. Here is our label. So there, can you see the 4-to-1, 10-to-1? So when you go, there is, say, the Dan Shen with the 10-to-1, go away, pop up, that says here that it's 10-to-1. You take that 125 milligrams and you times it by 10.
Okay.
So that's, we label like the Australians do because we're Australian and we want people to know that they're getting the therapeutic dosage range. That is not a standard way of labeling in the US. We do it because that's how we label in Australia. And even though we're manufacturing in the US, we don't want to confuse our patients because we want you to know if the herb you're taking is therapeutic, because we're treating kidney disease and all the research says you have to have Dan Shen in these big dosages for it to work. There's no point taking it otherwise. My point is, in the US, with the formula that we were looking at, you don't know if you're in therapeutic range or not. You have no idea, which is my biggest frustration when it comes to buying off places like iHerb. And sometimes some of your products will do label correctly and sometimes they don't. So to give you an example, if I go back to, let me move this. Here is an Australian label. So you can see same thing, 550 milligrams, equivalent curcuminoids, 522.5, equivalent dry rhizome. So 500 is taken from 37.75 grams.
That's
and again,
a large amount.
Yeah, that's what people don't realize is the 550 milligrams, that's not what you're looking at. You actually want to know equivalent dry root and equivalent curcuminoids. You want to know the therapeutic dosage range. But when it comes to herbs, and it's just herbs in the US, really, the labeling, you're shooting in the dark. You have no idea.
Wow. So
that is why I only tend to pick brands. So if we go to Thorn, the brand that I said was really good. So that one is a phospholipid. It's got 1 gram of that. And then...
so this is a different turmeric preparation that has liposomal or something?
Yes, it's liposomal.
Okay, but you can talk about that. In case people don't know what liposomal means, we'll talk about that. Yeah,
we will. So, that one, but there was a brand in here. Let's go to ashwagandha. I know there are. So here. So this is as far as herbs go, if you want a good quality brand off iHerb, Gaia herbs. Okay. Gaia, the straight herbs are great. They specialize in it. They are organic, is my understanding. They're non-GMO. They specialize in this. They're very good. They've got great formulas. I have no problem buying Gaia Herbs. In fact, I know one of the doctors sitting on the board of Gaia Herbs that's on the regulatory stuff. So it's overseen by a doctor. The formulas are looked at. You'll see with us. Yeah, you'll see with ashwagandha, withania root, it tells you how many withania olides in there. That's that active part that you're looking at, 2.5 milligrams. You can do a quick Jace on Google. But if you scroll down the page here, each capsule contains 2.7 milligram dry herb equivalent. At least they're saying it on there.
Oh.
Everyone else doesn't say it. So again, Gaia, that would be the one that I would go to. You can see that's that 350 milligrams, organic ashwagandha, withania, and then how many of the active phytochemicals. So that's like the drug part of the plant that we know that works. That's got all of that on the label. Great. Gluten-free, certified B Corp, full spectrum. That means they're doing that HPLTC testing as well, but they've got the full spectrum of the plant in there, not just the isolated properties. They do the sustainably sourced. I know they do all the testing because I've checked with them before. And you can see what are other ingredients: vegetable glycerin, water, and it's in a vegan capsule. So there's really no other excipients in there. So
right.
Really
so
great.
All the rice bran and magnesium stearate and things that you see in a lot of supplement pills is
not in that one. If we go to another brand, this is a well-known brand on iHerb that lots of people buy. And we've just got ashwagandha withania 300 milligrams. We have no idea of the therapeutic dose in there. We know it's a KSM 66 ashwagandha, full spectrum, but that doesn't mean much to people. Other ingredients: cellulose, vegetarian capsule, magnesium stearate, silicon dioxide. We don't know how much dry herb was in there. So you have really no idea of the dosage range and if you're going to get anywhere close to what you need. Then you've got another really popular brand that people buy that's very similar to the Yarrow formula. This one's got 450 milligrams. Now, this one has total withanioids 11 milligrams, so at least they've got that in there. Again, the Gaia was, I think, that was 2.5. So this one's saying that that's a little bit stronger.
So this one's by, oh, I see. It has the percentage and the milligrams. I see.
Yeah, this is now another really popular brand, but you don't know, again, the dry root that was taken out of. So again, you don't really know how much you're getting. And then another brand that it may be not as popular, but organic ashwagandha powder, it says how much. The extract, the withanioids, 280 milligrams from 1.4 milligrams. And then supercritical 10 milligrams of withanioids. So again, labeled a little bit better with its, active ingredients in there. This is done in this GMP facility. No ingredients of animal origin. And if we go through here, clinical strength, here we go. So these also say equivalent to 4.6 milligrams of ashwagandha per serving. So again, you're now getting this brand much better. You're getting all the information that you want. So this brand is probably one that I would trust. It's got the USD organic, so it's certified. It's certified non-GMO. It's actually got all of that on the bottle. So that brand I would be very happy to use, having a quick look at this. So it's got, if it's got those certifications on there, they're expensive to get. So if they're spending money on getting the organic sort of these stamps on there and the non-GMO stamps, they're very expensive. Then you go, okay, they're going to be doing all their testing, the HPLTC chromatography. I'd feel pretty safe taking that. Plus they're labeling it but the way that I'm closer that I want to label, plus they're saying how much herb it got on. So for me, going on iHerb, comfortable buying that, not so comfortable with the other ones. And then Gaia, because it's a product I know, comfortable with that. That's how I make a decision. So that's what I'm looking for when I'm looking at herbs. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps a lot. It helps a lot. And to know that if you do your homework on one item that you could probably extrapolate to the rest of the brand.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another major piece of the puzzle, I think.
And I think too, I've got my go-to for herbs, which generally is Gaia. Himalaya looks pretty good. So I might have to do some more research, maybe reach out to them, but I just stick to Gaia for herbs. And then when it comes to nutrition, I tend to stick to Thorn. But then, we've also got great brands like Metagenics, or I tend to stick to the Australian brands or my own brand if I'm working with kidney stuff. So now let's go dive into nutrients. Nutrients are a lot easier because it's harder to make false label claims because it is a chemical, it's like a chemical compound that you're looking at. So hit me up with questions that you have about that, because I guess that comes down to knowing things like what type or what form, extra excipients, all of those sort of things is what you sort of look at when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know what, before we talk about that, let's just explain to people what liposomal means and a couple of examples of when liposomal formulas are useful and not important or not useful.
Sure. So a liposomal is a delivery system. So what it's done is it's taken the nutrient or the herb, or whatever it is, and it's wrapped it in like a phospholipid layer. So it's basically got fat. The most common transport system that we use is sunflower oil. That's the most common liposomal sort of formula. So it's taken, say, CoQ10 or vitamin C is a really popular liposomal sort of thing, and it's mixed it up with a fat transporter, and that fat transporter takes a nutrient, and because our gut lining and our cells have a biophospholipid membrane wrapped around it, the fat or the liposomal formula helps that formula to be better absorbed through the gut wall or into the cell membranes.
So certain things might need that extra help getting into the cell, or like you were saying before, to get into the mitochondria, say where there's another membrane it has to get through. Certain might really be helped with that.
Yeah, there are definitely certain vitamins, like CoQ10's one, where really you want it all the way into the mitochondria, which is right deep inside the cell organelle. So, CoQ10 is generally better, and you don't get liposomal CoQ10 from this. CoQ10 is generally fat based anyway, and then we put things like bioperine in it, which helps the absorption. So that's a natural sort of fatty one anyway. Vitamin C is interesting because vitamin C is a water soluble vitamin, but you'll often see that liposomally if we want to get it deeper into the cell as an antioxidant and those sort of things, rather than maybe just. And because vitamin C is so easily excreted through the body, vitamin C is, if your body doesn't need it or doesn't want it, it goes in one end and out the other. The liposomal formula actually helps the body take on more vitamin C because it is naturally water soluble. You just flush it. So if your body can't absorb it at the time, that's why you get diarrhea when you take too much vitamin C. So liposomal packaging vitamin C like that actually helps it to get better absorbed and deeper into the body.
Oh, interesting. There is so much to this. It's my brain is starting to feel a little bit full.
Okay.
So what was it you were going to start talking about a second ago?
We're going to just go through nutrients and like, how do you know what, magnesium, there's like thousands of different types of magnesium. So how do you know if your magnesium citrate and your magnesium glycinate or your malate, how do you know which one to take, sort of thing? Or
right. So there's that. And I mean, that's one of those things where you need to do your homework. And I guess for me, I always try to find, where you're talking about knowing your brand, I try to know my expert. I try to find, I pay close attention when I find an expert that I really love and trust, and I try to really pay attention to them and see what they say. But yeah, so there, with something like magnesium, I mean, and then you need to know that about every single thing. So that's where you need your degree. You went to school for however many years to learn all that stuff.
Yeah. You need to work with a practitioner. It really is. That's where I go. That really is important, because you do, like if someone's got fibromyalgia, I'm using a very different type of magnesium versus maybe someone with chronic fatigue with no pain versus
Mm.
magnesium for someone with gut issues, magnesium for someone with kidney disease. They're all different types of magnesium that I'm using. Or maybe I'm using a blend of and most people don't know, like a mineral has what we call a chelation on it, which is like a claw. Chelation means claw, that helps the mineral move into the body. The type of chelation or the type of claw that mineral is attached to will make the mineral move into different spots in the body. Iron's a great example. The Ferrosorb, and I don't know, is it Ferrosorb that you get over the counter in the US as well? I know that's the one
I
we
don't
get.
know. I don't think I don't think I've heard of that, but that doesn't mean it's not what we have.
Australian brand, but it causes really bad constipation in most people.
Yes.
The iron's not very well absorbed. It's the over-the-counter. Whereas the naturopaths might be using iron biglycinate or a different type of iron because it's better absorbed and doesn't cause constipation. Again, the one over the counter from the chemist, cheap, but causes constipation and often doesn't drive up iron levels. The one from the naturopath might cost a bit more, but it's not going to cause you constipation. It's probably going to be better absorbed. Or maybe the naturopath might pick up that you're actually deficient in something like molybdenum, which is needed to help go with iron and transport it, or, it's all of those sort of things that make a difference, which again, back to my point of working with a practitioner, can be really handy.
Yeah, that is it's kind of discouraging in a way. It's encouraging that, if things haven't worked, that maybe it means you're doing it wrong. If you're doing DIY kind of self-prescribing, and that's really encouraging to know, wow, it might not be this doesn't work. It might be I'm just doing it wrong for people who are not seeing the results that they want. But I think that's it's a really, really interesting and good point. And it's, when my whole background, like my personal orientation, I'm really into food and I'm really into the health aspects of food. I love food. And as I was saying earlier, my whole herbal training was about the garden and the kitchen. We didn't have, milligrams of anything. It was just like, here, take this tea. And that's such a different, that system has its own validity. And then once you get into the whole like things in bottles, it's really a fundamentally and foundationally different thing. It's not
100%.
it's not like it's almost like two whole different systems. Even if you have dandelion root in one, if you have dandelion root tea and you have dandelion root capsules, it's a whole different deal.
Totally different. And when I was thinking about this week and connecting with you and doing all this, I was like, wow, okay, this is why, number one, natural medicine can get such a bad rap because it can be these cheaper products not following good manufacturing processes that are just cheap out to make money. Two, people taking the wrong product for what they need because they just don't know better. It's not anybody's fault. And so I kept coming back to, this is why you need to work with a practitioner, really, and have them guide you on brands and things. But I also get not everybody's got access to that. It's even simple things like a multivitamin, right? If you've got the MTHFR gene, which is a very common gene, but if the gene is expressing, and lots of people have heard of this gene, you won't convert folic acid into its active form, 5-methyl-tetrahydrofolate, right? So you go and take a supplement with folic acid in there, you're just blocking your folate receptors and actually making your folate deficiency worse. Even though your blood levels may show normal folate, you need to take a supplement with the activated folate in it. All these nuances. And, again, Thorne, I think all of Thorne's products use the activated form. You may as well just use that. But if you're preconception and you're taking folic acid, which everybody knows to take for a healthy pregnancy, if you're one of these women with an expressive MTHFR gene and you take a normal prenatal vitamin with folic acid in there and you don't know this information, you can make a folic acid deficiency worse.
Wow.
And again, doctors aren't trained in this stuff. Most midwives and OBYs aren't trained in this stuff either. So this is where it becomes this big minefield. And again, I kept going, well, how can anyone get trained on that unless you're going to go and do a degree like I did? And I take for granted that I know all of this information and know that I have an MTHFR gene. I need to take activated folate and things like that. And so I guess it comes back to, when it comes to nutrition, I tend to stick to brands like Thorne. Quality of Life also do very good things. When it comes to herbs, I stick to Gaia, just because I know they're testing high quality. You know, I'd say our products are the same for kidney disease. That's why we get really amazing results, you know. So you're better off spending a little bit more money and buying a good product and not urinating out your supplements because they're not working versus not. And maybe,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe you just see a practitioner once, get a really good idea of what you need, or see your GP, integrative doctor, and run some testing to go, maybe I'm iron deficient, magnesium deficient, and do it that way. What were you going to say?
Just, and if there's sort of one thing, like even if people don't have your list of brands that you love, just that one thing, the CGMP, like that alone is a really good clue.
That's a great clue. I wouldn't buy anything that doesn't have that on there in the US. In Australia, you have the Alstel numbers on there, so it'll be okay.
Not just for herbs. Like I'm looking at these things too, a couple of things from my own shelf. We looked at that turmeric and we looked at a lot of things, so that is good. But like this quercetin here, it's got it.
I looked it up.
Got the CGMP thing.
Yep. And it's in the correct form. The yeah. Yeah.
But I just bought this because it seemed okay. I didn't know what I was doing. And then this is CoQ10 from the grocery store, and it does not have a CGMP.
And what did you find in there? Because I looked at it. Did you see what oil it was in there?
Oil, soy oil in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So CoQ10, does it need some kind of carrier oil, or can it just be like smaller capsules with just CoQ10 in them?
Yeah, I was looking at CoQ10 in Australia to know, and so we can download excipient lists separately. There's MitoQ is the brand that has a slightly different delivery system in it, and that's very, very good. And I don't believe that's got anything else in it. Some CoQ10s, you can use coconut oil. So in Australia, like some of our really good brands where they're non-GMO and stuff, they're using coconut oil as the lipid base in it.
And that's much more stable and
yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You're not going to get the heat issues that you have with things like sunflower oil or soy oil. And again, you've got all the GMO. Then if you don't have a CGMP stamp on it, you just don't know how that's been done. CoQ10, you know, generally, and there's different forms. So the form that you've got in that one is not the more active form of, that's just standard CoQ10. Ubiquinol is a better absorbed form of CoQ10. There's, you know, you can use different forms. So you can have CoQ10. If you just have CoQ10, you really should have biotin in it or black pepper to help it absorb. Otherwise, you have ubiquinol in there. So there's all those little nuances that you need to know about that stuff as well. So with ours, we use CoQ10, but we use black pepper to make sure that the CoQ10 gets absorbed. So there are some studies to say CoQ10 and ubiquinol are just as good as each other. And if you're just using straight CoQ10, then you want to have black pepper or biotin in it to help the absorption go across, which is how we did ours. And that was to keep the cost down, because the ubiquinol, a CoQ10 supplement with ubiquinol in it by itself is like triple the price. So again, a ubiquinol supplement will cost you more, or you can get CoQ10. It'll be labeled as CoQ10 or ubiquinone, which is what's on yours. But then you want black pepper with it to make sure it's transported, and you want to make sure it's done in a GMP facility. It's non-GMO. It's not using, you know, rancid oils and things like that. So,
wow. There's a lot going on. I'm so glad to be having this conversation. It's really raised my awareness, and it's anytime you don't know what you don't know, it's easy to be led astray.
Yeah. And there's some really clever marketing out there as well. And it's to do your due diligence around that. And again, I have to keep coming back to working with a practitioner, because there are subtle nuances, like of what will work for one person won't work for another. But again, I think doing a bit of time to go, okay, I am someone that likes to take supplements. I'm going to do a bit of research. I'm going to invest in a brand. I'm going to check that they've got the good manufacturing process stamp on them. I'm going to check that they're non-GMO. If they're doing herbs, I'm going to check that they can give me this high level chronography testing. If the supplements, are they good? Are they pharmaceutical grade? Are they a brand that it's really reputable? And then I'm just going to stick to that. And I'm not going to make it any more complicated than that. That's my advice to anyone that says, I'm going to do it DIY. Spend half a day just getting that information, CGMP camp, make sure it's non-GMO. Is it, really good pharmaceutical grade? What are their reviews like? Have they got, are they reputable? And with herbs, have they got all this stuff that I want? And then I'm just going to stick with that. And I'm not going to get pulled into like cheaper stuff here and there and all of those sort of things. And I think that builds, apart from building brand loyalty, you get to know all of that sort of stuff. And, every now and then, if you think they've been taken over, their prices suddenly change, just make sure they're not being bought out by a big conglomerate and all of those sort of things, because that happens too. And then suddenly you see supplements getting cheaper and they're just being washed down. And cheaper is not necessarily better, is the other thing to go as well. And more expensive is not necessarily better either, but generally those products that are a little bit more, I tend to go in the medium to slightly higher, and with all of that sort of stuff, because I know then they've probably spent a bit more money and done their testing and really looked at that sort of stuff.
Wow. Very, very interesting.
Because being a manufacturer, I can tell you can make really cheap products and sell them heaps to people, but they're probably not going to work. We spent more money on really good quality products and really making sure our ingredients was really good. And yes, we have to give that across to consumers. But again, for me, I'm working with people with kidney disease. Everything gets filtered through the kidneys. Their kidneys are already not working properly. Why would I put a subpar vitamin, herbal nutrition in there? All I'm going to do is potentially damage kidneys more, versus what we're seeing is people getting better. So,
and I think too, I'm curious, one more question. I'm curious about whether, there must be certain things that, like, I don't know, like if I'm shopping at the grocery store, say, like I might get a vegetable that's not on the Dirty Dozen list. I might get that one, not organic. But if I'm getting beef, I'm going to get it from my local grass-fed organic farmer. And I'm sure that's true in the world of supplements too, where there are certain things like if you don't get the really good one, you're wasting your money, or as you said, maybe hurting yourself. Whereas there must be other things that are like, it's cool to just get the whatever because it's probably completely fine.
100%. I think vitamin C generally is pretty safe. You can't go wrong with that, apart from knowing that big doses will cause diarrhea. Vitamin E, on the other hand, you do want to make sure you're getting good quality. You want to make sure that you're not getting, you want to know the type of trophococcals that you're getting, and you want to make sure that they're not, artificial is not the word, that they're not, you want natural. You don't want synthetic. Synthetic vitamin E has been shown to be a problem. So that one you do want to know. CoQ10, what we talked about, you want to make sure it's got non-GMO sunflowers and all of those sort of things in there. And you want to just know if it's ubiquinone or ubiquinol. And if it's ubiquinone, you want to make sure there's black pepper in it. Magnesium, pretty safe, depending on the type you get. If you're getting magnesium oxide, know that that's a bowel cleanser. That's not going to boost your magnesium levels. It's going to cause diarrhea. That's generally labeled on the bottle, but sometimes people don't know. Iron, again, will work. It will cause constipation in some and not in others. You're right. So there are things that will work differently to different levels. Generally, the nutrients aren't too bad, just they'll have a different effect. But you're 100% right on that stuff. And it's because there's so many of them. it's such a big list. Again, B vitamins, I just go, if you don't know your MTHFR status, get ones with the activated Bs in there. You're better off doing that, because that can cause issues if you don't know if you've got an MTHFR gene that's active or not. Hence, I tend to use Thorn for all of that. So yeah, you're right. There's definitely the dirty dozen list out there, but again, it comes down to the nuances of a human, because we're not all the same, right? We've got all different genes and pathways that are all expressing differently. So,
wow,
and that's what makes this stuff tricky.
yeah, yeah, I think there are so many misconceptions and bad actors in the supplement world, and just confused people. And I'm really glad to have this conversation and be able to shed some light on it. This has been very educational for me, and certainly one of my take-home messages from all of this is ask Fiona. I know where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess anyone listening that's like, oh, can't ask Fiona. What would probably Alyce and I would both love is if you have questions about this, or you have a burning question around supplements, put it in the comment section, because Alyce and I can jump back on and do more videos around this. We understand that navigating the supplement world and knowing what to take is tricky, again, which is why I come back to working with the healthcare practitioner. And again, knowing that not everybody has access to that. And that's why we produce these videos and try to help. So if there's a question that you have that's not so much individual, but a general thing on how to read labels or what to look out for, let us know. We'll jump back on and do another video. There's definitely stuff that I probably don't think of because of the education, and even Alyce has got much more education than a general person. So she's probably already thinking higher again. So if there's something we've missed, please put a comment below, and Alyce and I will either get back to you, or we'll make another video and give you a bit more confidence around this sort of stuff.
I'm thinking there's enough. It really is, like 5 years of naturopathic school. I mean, there's so much here for people to know that we can't begin to cover it all. So
No, exactly. A 5-year degree.
Really important points, and this has been great. Thank you so much, Fiona.
No, thank you for asking the question. It was such a great question to ask, and it's such a useful and good video to put together. So both Alyce and I hope that you found this useful. We'll put it both in Alyce's group and on her Fabulous and 50+. If you haven't seen that, I'll put the link in below here. It'll be on our YouTube channel. If you have questions, make sure you put it in the comments below, hit like and hit subscribe, and whatever you need to do on your side, Alyce.
Will do. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks again, everybody. I'll put Alyce's details below. If you want to know more about us, KidneyCoach.com, and we'll talk to you all later. Bye.